Everybody, welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome back to another episode of 5 Influential Horror. This time, NorinRadd89 is back with me. We're not reviewing a movie. Instead, we're going to be talking his 5 influential horror movies and why he picked them. Thanks for doing this. I'm excited about your list.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I was very excited when you asked me to do this one, so I've been anticipating it.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to think. I think at least 4 of your 5 have not been on here before for anybody's list.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool.
And I'm not sure, I can't remember if anybody has done one of them, but I know for sure at least the 4. So that's always exciting. And to hear new movies that people haven't talked about before. So you want to remind everybody quickly, just kind of about your channel and what you do over there?
Of course, thank you. And my channel is NorinRadd89. That's where you can find me. And I typically do horror reviews and rankings and stuff like that. But I also love my physical media. So anytime I pick up anything new, or at the end of the year, I do physical media collection videos and stuff like that. So that's the kind of stuff you can find on my channel.
Yeah. And all of his stuff will be linked in the description, the YouTube, and where to find him in the socials as well. Sweet. So yeah, so let's jump in. So the first one on your list is Friday the 13th.
Yes, and for this one, I wanted it to be, in general, it's the whole franchise, but the first one, I did experience that one first, so it was kind of cool to really get into the Friday the 13th franchise and go all the way through. Like when I watched it, I think it was one of those probably Fear Fest marathons, or it might have been a Friday the 13th day, and they were just showing them all, and I just binged them, and I probably was 7 or 8. I was around that age and stuff like that when I watched them. But they were the TV edited versions. So
true, right.
Yeah.
That's a little bit
different. So that's the benefit when you get the TV edited ones. You kind of be safer as an adult. You're like, oh, I can trust them in the room. You know what I mean?
That's right. It was not as you don't have to worry about the content as much. That's true, I guess.
Yeah. But my family always, be it my mom, even my grandmother and my grandpa, were always very accepting of horror. So anytime I got into it, they introduced me to stuff. And I watched a lot of them with my grandpa, Friday the 13th. So I think he just liked slashers. He loved that vibe. You know what I mean? It's a very simple concept. You don't have to think about it too much or anything like that. And Friday the 13th is just the one that it got me obsessed with horror. It wasn't the first horror film I saw, but it got me obsessed with it and made me want to experience so much more. And every time I watched a movie, I just loved it. I was like, oh, let's find out what happened to Jason next, and let's continue. And when you're that little, you don't think about the continuity or what's going on. You're like, you're just having fun about what's the next adventure you're going to be on with this character. So that's what got me so fascinated with that franchise.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, because when you watch stuff when you're younger, you really do look at it from a completely different lens. Because now, especially because and I know we both, because not only just because we're both horror fans, but because we're also do content around horror, you do tend to get you start dissecting things, you start really thinking things through, you start you just notice things very differently when you grow up than you do when you're younger. Because so my equivalent of that was sort of except for it was also the first horror movie I ever saw, but was Poltergeist. And I remember that movie was not only terrifying, but I remember being a kid and just wanting more of it. And none of the anything else that I saw during that time frame, everything was just perfect. There was nothing wrong with any of it. And now I'm I hate this movie and this movie, so that's true. That's a good point. When you're younger, you're able to just cut all that off because it doesn't exist. You can just enjoy it. So that's a good point.
Oh yeah, and then as you said, when I grew up, and now that I watch the Friday the 13th franchise more, it's because they just do so much things that are just very simple. The final girl concept, and they really hone that to a perfection. I'm a fan of gore. I'm a fan of kills, so I like when you get creative and you get practical. And also, the first film kind of sets up that. The mother, and you realize it's the mother at the end, and it's the reveal, and you get kind of shocked because at that time we didn't have a lot of female killers at that time, which was cool in
Right.
1980 to have that reveal of Betsy Palmer. I loved it. And
Yeah,
then
that's a
when
good
you
point.
get to the later films, you
Yeah.
find out Jason was like a mama's boy and like just misses his mom, and he wants to get back at these camp counselors and these teenagers that are just invading his camp. So it's just, for me, I never
That's
really
true.
viewed him as a villain, even though he does really bad things. But
Right.
but I think, like I said, as I grew up, I've just found so much more nostalgic love with all the franchises and everything. But there's definitely, like you said, ones that I can pick out. I'm like, oh, I don't like that, what they did with that one. Like for
Yeah.
me, it's part 8 is my least favorite. And I know a lot of people
Oh,
love Jason Takes Manhattan,
yep.
but that's my least favorite entry in the franchise. Just what they did with that one, the way it takes place and everything. It's just the one I return to the least, but I can still have fun with it when I watch it.
Yeah. Do you have these ranked on your box on your Letterboxd? You do
Yes,
that?
I have these ranked. Yeah, and I think, yeah, the Friday the 13th, and I have a video too that I filmed on my channel for that as well.
I don't think I've seen that one. I'll link your letterbox too, because I know you're better about making those lists and things than I am. I never remember to do. I was like, I kept seeing them on social media. I'm like, how are people making these? Like, where are they making them? Then I realized it was on
Yeah.
Letterboxd.
Oh yeah, it's cool. It's one of my favorite things. That's how I've been keeping track recently of all the films that I watched this year.
Smart.
Perfect thing to do.
That's super smart. Yeah, I definitely need to be utilizing it. Yeah. Yeah, Friday the 13th is one I really only I know for a fact I haven't seen all of them, but I don't remember all the ones that I've seen. I know I've seen the first 2 for sure, and I know I've seen the
Mhm.
space one, which is X, I think. Right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Jason X. That's a lot of schlocky, campy fun. I love
It's
that
crazy,
one.
yeah, but I think that, I mean, I think the only one that I felt like was more serious was, I'd like the first one, I think to me was the one that was like the most like focused and serious, and then as they kind of go, they kind of evolve into something else, so I really like that one a lot, and this is one that has not been on anybody's list. No one has talked about Friday the 13th, which is
That's crazy.
it's yeah, because it's
Yeah,
one
it's
of the
crazy.
icons, right? Like but it's yeah, no one has talked about it. So that's cool that it's on your list to get to talk about it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm the huge Jason fan, which is really cool because me, my mom's a Freddy fan, I'm
Okay.
a Jason fan, and my wife's a Michael Myers fan. So we got all three in the household kind of area.
That's funny. Yeah, that's good that like you're around, like you have people in your day-to-day life though that are even into horror. Because one of the reasons I started my channel was because I didn't have that and have people around to like talk and I make my best friend go see things sometimes and like, but my mom is like again like hate like is like not into that stuff at all. And my dad is more into like cheesy sci-fi stuff than like the type of horror and stuff that I'm into, which that was kind of like my gateway anyway. It was like the cheesy stuff because that's what I saw. But so it's cool that you have people in your life that are also like into the same things too. That's nice.
Oh yeah, it's fun. And then now we get to pass it on to our children, so that's
That's
going to be even more fun.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely raising a horror fan. He right now, like my son is really into like shark movies and he likes monsters and stuff. But I think like, some of the other stuff is too much anyway, because he wouldn't understand it because he's so little. But definitely think with his like the way he invests in monsters, I think he's definitely gonna end up being like a horror
Oh
fan.
yeah, cool.
It might be genetic anyway. I'm not really sure.
I think so. I think it might be eventually. We'll find out years from now, like decades from now. They'll do a study
Uh-huh.
on it at some college.
Yeah, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, you can pass this on." um, Yeah, cool. So your second one is A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge.
Yes. Now this one is special to me. Very special place in my heart because this is, in fact, the first horror movie I ever saw that I remember
Oh,
seeing,
okay.
and I
Okay.
physically remember watching it. I
Yeah.
was 6 years old. I was in my mom's room, and I think she had the VHS tape, and my dad was here too.
Mhm.
And my dad, he was kind of in and out of my life, so this is a memory that sticks with me because this is when they were together. So I remember them
Oh,
together.
okay.
You know what
Right.
I mean? It didn't happen often, but like when it did, like they were there. So
Yeah.
I remember sitting in the room watching Freddy's Nightmare or Freddy's Revenge, and I was like, oh man, like what is this character? Like what's going on? And for me, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 is the scariest one. I think by far, hands down, that's the scariest Robert Englund's ever been. Like when I watched that one, I'm like, no, that Freddy,
Yeah.
he's a freaking demon. He's crazy. He's out to get you. Like that's how evil he is. Like the scenes that he has with Jesse are just like, oh, like so haunting. Like that scene when he peels back like his brain and he's
Brain.
talking to Jesse and like Jesse, you see Mark Patton's just sweating and he's like scared and he's like the perfect
Yeah.
scream guy too because he's got
Yeah.
a really good screaming voice.
Yeah.
So it's just I get goosebumps thinking about it because it's just 9 times out of 10 that's the Freddy movie I watch
Yeah.
because it just gives me everything I want. It has all of the iconic lines. It has a scary Freddy. It has a character I can grab onto, and it's not just because he was a male, but it's because he is going through this transition in his life where he doesn't know if he's straight or he's a homosexual. And I know
Yeah.
it's very much subtext in the
Yeah.
film. It's a very much subtextual thing,
Sure.
but at an early age, I started growing up as a teen, it just spoke to me even more. And
Yeah.
that's why I really love the film too. And I like all the characters, Lisa, Grady, his friend, like who's kind of his frenemy. It's his friend, but they're
Yeah.
enemies too. They compete against each other. But
Yeah.
he's the one he goes to and he's like, dude, you need to watch me sleep because I
Yeah.
trust you. And like, you know what I mean? That's cool.
Yeah.
I love that. And Lisa being the girl that sticks by his side no matter what, and she still goes to pull him out of it when Freddy takes over his body. So it's
Yep.
just it has everything I want in a Freddy film, and it's like said so scary. And like that scene when he's at the pool and he has like his hands out and he's like, "You're all my children now." Like that's oh man,
Ooh.
it's so good. So, I
Yeah.
gush over this
Well,
one. I love this one.
yeah, and I think with this one, this was when we just got more of that because in the first Nightmare on Elm Street, it's a lot of story, a lot of getting to know the characters, building up the world around what all of these things. And so while obviously there are Freddy moments in the original, there's not as many. Whereas this one definitely you get a lot more of that. And this was also like you said, like this is more scary, more serious. Like this is before Freddy kind of turned into like a comedy, like a not comedy, I
Yeah,
guess that's probably a bit much, but you get what I mean. The more like where you're chuckling instead of like kind of nervous about going to sleep at night. Like it was very
yeah.
different. And actually of all of the because I think I've seen all of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. I think this is my second favorite. My first favorite is Dream Warriors. I love that one. So this is my
Oh, nice.
second. This is my second favorite one though because I remember the first time I saw this one, I was pretty young. I wasn't as young as you were, but I was definitely not a teenager yet. And I remember when I went back and watched it as an adult, I was surprised how much of it I remembered because it stuck with me. Like it unsettled me. It
For
was
real.
scary, like you said. Like all those moments I could remember so vividly, like I had just watched it the day before and it had been years. And so that's a testament, I think, to like just how scary this movie was for especially for its time and around the time that it came out. So yeah, I think this is my second favorite one. And I remember it so vividly from seeing it just the one time and then watching it again as an adult. Like most times I don't remember stuff. Like I'm like, I don't even remember watching this movie. But that wasn't the case with this one because you just like you said, it's got so many iconic things in it that you're just like, you can't forget them.
Oh yeah. And like I said, this one is the one where I think the acting is just very good. Like when I watch the
Yeah.
characters, the chemistry between all of them,
Hmm.
even that crazy PE teacher that they have that ends up finding Jesse at the S&M bar. Like, I mean, even he has his moments, and it's like he's that PE teacher that everybody knows. You know, that guy he's
That's
kind
true.
of mean, he's really rough on you, and you're like, oh man, I don't want to go to PE today because it's
Yeah.
him. And that's the kind of vibe you get, and it's like that was so relatable to me because like there's so much in the film that it's like I've experienced that, I've seen stuff
Yeah.
like that, kind of thing. And then having Freddie in it, who's like one of my favorite slasher icons, he's just so great. So
Yeah.
that's what was so potent about it. And like me, I think I'm just a sequel fan too. I've noticed that like I really do like the first films for a lot of these films, but in
Yeah.
most franchises I prefer sequel films. I've noticed that if the franchise goes
Interesting.
really long, like the only one I could think of is probably Halloween because
Oh, that
Friday
you
the
did.
13th
Okay.
is
Huh.
the first. Yeah, this is the first one. Yeah, that's probably the only franchise that I can think of where that the first one is my favorite. Every other one is usually a sequel.
A sequel to. Huh.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think there's only a few franchises that have strong sequels in my opinion. Least like not and that's like of course not even looking at things like ones that have like 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think this would be in a top like list for sequels for sure because it is a really strong addition to a franchise that, I mean, obviously like plenty of people are big fans of Freddy, of Nightmare on Elm Street, what he became, what he was, all of it. But I don't know that I feel like a lot of people really talk about 2 that much. Like it's usually 1, and then recently there's been this bandwagon for Dream Warriors, I've noticed.
Yeah.
But like 2 doesn't really, I don't feel like a lot of people talk about 2.
I think it's just because it's one that people love. Like I've never really talked to anybody that said they hated to. Everybody pretty much likes it or loves this
Yeah.
film. It's
Yeah.
just kind of one that, when they bring up the franchise, it's because I think Dream Warriors is just so fun. It really is a fun one. Dream Warriors and the cast and what they're able to do.
It's
And there's so many
mhm,
iconic moments in that one as well, too. Like,
that's true.
so I think Dream Warriors stands out just because of the cast a little bit more. And then the
I can
first
see
film,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and then the first film, I think it's because it's Wes Craven. I think that's mainly because it's him, you know what I mean? And
That's
he
a good
didn't
point.
really want to do any sequels or anything.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. But it is good to like, I mean, because I feel like we're not really we definitely have franchises now. I wouldn't say that we don't, but they're built so differently now than they were back before. Like when you're talking about Halloween, the Freddys, the Jasons, like their franchises, they're just not built around the same things like they used to be. Like with the big 2 right now would be like Insidious and The Conjuring. Those would be like the 2 bigger
Yeah.
ones that have like a bunch of movies, and they're still making more, but they're just done so differently. And it's almost like a lot of times I feel like they're not even in the same world sometimes. Like when I'm thinking about like movies in the Conjuring franchise, for example, a lot of them I don't even really think about them as Conjuring movies, like if that makes sense. Like it's not like when you're going through these older franchises, you're like, okay, it's this Friday the 13th through and through, like, but when you get into these
Yeah.
other types that they make now, it's almost like everything could be its own thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be connected. And I think like they're just built so different. So like when we get these continuations of these newer franchise, the love and the magic just doesn't feel like the same as it did for, the older ones that we like. Poltergeist is like my franchise, right? So like, when I think about how strong 2 was for Poltergeist, it's just so different now. Like the franchises just aren't built the same.
Oh yeah. I think a lot of it too has to do with nostalgia. And it's like,
Yeah.
I love 80s and like 70s. So like when
Yeah.
anything has a 70s, 80s vibe, I gravitate towards that. Even though I didn't grow up in that era, it just has a certain vibe about it. And you
Yeah.
like watching it and you like experiencing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that. Well, I guess that's a perfect segue into the next one. Speaking of 80s
Yeah.
vibes, 70s and 80s vibes. So your number 3 is Sleepaway Camp.
Oh yeah. This one is, oh man, because I was probably under 10 when I saw this. I'm not gonna
Oh
lie.
my God.
I saw a lot of movies that I shouldn't have been watching at a very young age. I'm not gonna lie. But I saw this pretty young, and that ending just, whew, man, that ending gets to you. Like that ending, Felissa Rose and that shot, and
So
she's just
good.
iconic. She cemented
Yeah.
herself
Yeah.
as a horror icon, and she's so fun too. When you go meet her, she does the face. She'll take pictures and talk to you. She's amazing. She's a really fun person to meet.
Aw.
And Sleepaway Camp is one that it has all these campy vibes to it, and I like that too because it calls back to Friday the 13th.
Yep.
But
Yep.
we also have silly, campy acting in it as well, like Ricky's mom, Angela's aunt or whatever. She's weird. She's weird how she has like
Very,
the
very strange.
red
Yes.
little thing. She's like, I tied a red string around my finger and I forgot what it was for. Like it's so weird, so weird. But it's like a film that just I am down for every moment of it. Like it's one of those movies that I don't think there's like a bad moment. And for me, this is like one of those quintessential slasher films.
Yeah.
Like if I'm like, oh, you're trying to get into slasher movies and you're trying to make horror movies, this is like one of those films I would throw on a list. Like, you have to watch this. You really need to take
Yeah.
notes and watch this film. And it
Yeah.
has that cool whodunit type vibe as well with the Scream thing. You kind of don't know who's doing it. Is it
You
Angela?
don't.
Is it Ricky? Yeah, they kind of play on that, and like it's good because they have the lead counselor, right? The lead camp counselor thinks it's Ricky, and he just hates him so much, and
He's
he's
like,
like,
"You're trying to ruin me."
yeah, he's like telling all the counselors, and they're like, dude, you're crazy. Like, what's wrong with you, bro? And he's like, he's picking on like a 12-year-old kid. Like,
I
he
know.
thinks he's Satan or something.
He does. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And then the kills, all practical, which we love. We love practical kills because they stand the test of time.
Yep.
And when you watch them in this film, they're like, still today, they're so gruesome. They're so horrifying.
Yep.
And then they even have a kill in here that you don't get to see everything that's happening, but the shadow shot is so good.
Yes.
That kill, oh man, like that's gripping. And you get the pillow on the face, and then you just the sound effects, and you're like, oh my God, like
yes,
you picture it in your head, and you're like, no, stop. Like, you don't even want to.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. This one was I just saw this for the first time like 5 months ago, maybe just before the end of last year. I had never seen it before. And I was starting to do the Saturday movie reviews, and a friend of mine wanted to cover that. And I was like, that'll be a fun one because I have never seen it. And the only thing that kind of wasn't great about it in general is because I already, the ending had been ruined because it's such an old movie. There's all these conversations about the film. There's memes. There's, people sharing stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And so unfortunately, that part did get kind of ruined. So I did already know going into it who was responsible. But I have to say, though, even given that I did technically know how it was going to end, it still was a really great watch. Like, I still had a lot of fun with it. I was still invested in the story. There's, like you said, some of those kills, my favorite, most unsettling, I don't even know how to categorize it, but the kill with the cook was the one that like left me like, ooh, like, because you see, like, they leave the camera on him for so long after like his skin is like bubbling, and you're just like, ooh.
Yeah.
But it's so
good.
And like you said, practical. So even watching it in 2022, it held up beautifully because it looked like he had just had boiling hot water dumped on him. Like, it was very realistic. And it was just like, I mean, it's so unsettling. And the one thing this film does that I think is a testament to who filmed it is that they have these things where they linger on these specific moments so long that you cannot help but be uncomfortable. You're just like, any moment the camera's going to make me feel better and it's going to go to something else, and it does not. And like, when you get to the ending and the credits roll, you still have to look at that face the whole time the credits are rolling. And it's such smart filmmaking because your whole insides are like, I am really uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, I think they knew, like, the director just knew. He's like, I'm going to craft it this way and it'll change people. And it's one of those films, like, when you watch it, it just changes the way you watch horror films forever.
Oh my God.
And another thing that's great about this film is we're used to slasher films, and they're like, oh, let's show off the female body and let's get some nudity in there. But in this one, we get a lot of men with short shorts, and I think it's hilarious and it's awesome that this film is like, let's flip it on its head a little and let's show off the men and stuff like that. I think that's fabulous. You get the men throwing water balloons at each other and they're getting wet and everything, so it's just
a good
totally
point. I hadn't really
amazing.
thought about that. Yeah, because you've got the one counselor that's like huge and he wears like really small shorts and like really tight clothing. And and I like, one of my favorite lines is so stupid, but it made me laugh so hard, was after the kill from the lake. I forget the boy's name that dies, the one they find under the boat, or when the guy's cleaning up the chairs.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, I remember like after they've come and they're like talking about like all these things and it was an accident, we don't need to shut down, yada yada. That counselor goes, the cop's like, well, what were you going to say earlier? And he goes, I was just going to say, he's such a good swimmer. And I'm thinking, what the like, of all the things you could have said in the moment, like, why was that the thing you had to say? And I remember like that was just one of very many parts that just made me laugh because I was like, this poor guy. Like, I think the shorts were too short. I don't think he could like I think it was like cutting off circulation. So, but that was just it had so many funny parts that didn't take away from the scary, the gory, the like being uncomfortable. And as you know, that's a hard sell for me. Horror comedies can be really difficult for me to enjoy. And I don't know that this was necessarily meant to be a horror comedy originally, but there are some pretty funny moments in it that to me elevated the experience because the other stuff was done so well. And it really was a fun movie.
I think it's very natural comedy. I think they wrote
Yes.
it like definitely to be serious, but it just came off so natural. And especially because when you watch it, there's a lot of kid actors in this film. And I think the kids, the teenagers, they all do a fabulous job. They all feel like they're really at a camp. They've been there before and everything. So I really loved it. There's a certain authenticity to the film that just rings true. And when you watch it, even though it's very low budget, early back in the early 80s, it still has a very nice feel to it.
Yeah, no, I agree. So there's two others?
There's 4 others. So they did Sleepaway Camp 2, 3, and then there's a Return to Sleepaway Camp, which is awful. Don't do that. That's just that one's just a rehash, and they use only about 20 minutes of new footage, and then it's all old footage from the old films. It's kind of like recapping. Yeah, it's like recapping all the other ones, and then there's like 15 or 20 minutes of new footage, and that's it.
I hate that. That's obnoxious. So what I've heard, the consensus that the internet has given me from people posting about the films is that at least the second and the third one are a lot more silly. Did you like those? Like what was your thoughts on those?
I like those ones because Pamela Springsteen, as they changed the actress, so you kind of have to get used to that. It's a new actress, and they cast her same killer, Angela. But this one, the second and third one, they go for just full on, let's do the best kills we can. And you said, be as funny as we can.
Okay.
Yeah, they already know Angela's the killer. There's no kind of whodunit, no serious thriller stuff.
Right,
it's all, let's see. Yeah, it's more silly and what's the best kills.
Okay. I intend to eventually watch them. I just wasn't sure, like, especially with this being on this list specifically, I was curious what your thoughts were on the others because I knew there was more than just the one. So.
Oh yeah. So as a kid, the second one used to be my favorite as a kid. But now as an adult, now that I've returned to the franchise more and more, the first one has solidified itself as my favorite of the franchise.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I'll be honest, I was really surprised at how much I was able to enjoy it as a first watch because you just never know how, movies from, 70s, 80s, really any time frame like right now. Like you just never know because all of them age so differently. But I thought it was really, really fun. I think I gave it, what did I give it? Maybe like a 7.5 or an 8. I ranked it pretty high. I liked it.
That's cool. Yeah, I think this one has an 80% on Rotten Tomatoes, I think, which is really high.
It is
for a slasher film.
Especially for an older slasher film because people go and revisit those things or see them as first watches and hate them, and then they lower the ratings because they didn't like them. So it's kind of a testament to how much fun that film is because that's not normal. And I feel like when I looked at the ratings, it also has ratings in more places than I would think it would have given its age as well. But people really like it. It's like a cult classic, it has like a following. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of people I've seen where they said that they like this better than Friday the 13th in terms of like those camp type slasher films. I've heard a lot of people say they prefer Sleepaway Camp over the first Friday the 13th.
I think I prefer Friday the 13th. But I don't know that I feel like you wouldn't have Sleepaway Camp without Friday the 13th because it's very not similar is probably not the best way to put it, but the whole like not knowing who the killer is, thinking you know, but not really knowing. It's obviously the camp stuff, right?
Yep.
The some of the counselors are especially I don't know if she's really a counselor, the older female that's like over the girls' cabin or whatever. I don't know what she's
She's
like
I
a
think what she was a
counselor.
counselor. Yeah.
She's like a counselor. She's a bitch. Like she sucks. Like so, and then you've got the mean kids. And so it's got some parallels that I think like influence wise, like it probably definitely was influenced by Friday the 13th, but it's a very unique experience. It's definitely not, cookie cutter, the exact same thing or anything, but I think I still would prefer Friday the 13th over Sleepaway Camp, but I still really enjoyed it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're both very fabulous. Very fabulous. I'm a fan of the whole camp subgenre. If you wanted to classify that as a
Sure,
thing, like
yeah.
I'm definitely into that kind of setting for horror films.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's a good one. It's a very comfortable and vulnerable thing in life to just send your kids away or go work at volunteer at a camp or whatever. Like I think those are all like it's such a normal thing. And so when you add in this threat, I think that it just works really well because it's people. I went to camp things like that, not quite like that, but so it immediately triggers this like, oh, I've done this. I've been to these things. I've seen these things. Like these are real. This isn't like some made up, and that just makes it more effective, I think, as scary goes.
Oh yeah, definitely. Just more relatable, and then makes it just like you said, you can put yourself there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. So switching gears a little bit from slashers. And this is quite a jump from slashers.
Yeah, definitely.
We're gonna jump into number 4, which is Hellraiser.
Oh yes, Clive Barker's Hellraiser, 1987. And this one is so potent and so sticks with me so hard because I actually read the book too. And this is one of those films that like was the first horror film that I ever saw. I was like, I have to get the book. I need to read Clive Barker's book too.
Okay.
So that's kind of a big part of why I love this film so much too, is it kind of sparked a little bit of the literary love for me of loving reading stuff about films. So add to that, I think Clive Barker crafted such a perfect film. Like this is a film that has simple themes about obsession and love, but with this crazy like aesthetic wrapped around it, this dark S&M nature to it. And you kind of don't know if whenever you're watching the film, you really don't know if you're safe. You're kind of watching it and you're like, I don't know if I feel safe. Like I feel like something could happen right now. And when you throw in Pinhead and the Cenobites and Doug Bradley's, like, that's one of those like chef's kiss. Like, and he has a background in theater performance, and when you watch him as Pinhead, you can totally tell that he's able to just command the screen. He's like, look at me, every word I say is, you got to listen to it. And he doesn't even speak loud. He speaks at like kind of very soft, very whispers, and it's so you're captivated by this character.
No, that's true. To be able to do that, to your point, at the volume in which, and very slow movements, very subtle body movement in general, from walking to the head movements to the eyes, like it's all very muted compared to what you would expect from something, this type of villain, like you would expect something loud and booming and overly like moving quicker or moving more aggressively or, those kinds of things. And you don't really get any of that. I hadn't really thought about that, but you're right. You said it perfectly. Commands, like you pay attention when he's on camera, and really all of them are like, so I think I have seen all of the Hellraiser movie. They definitely lost me after a while. I don't remember. I think the one that lost me, and I don't even know which one it was, but it was like the one that had to do with like, was it like a chat room or something to do with like a computer? I don't remember.
Oh, Hell World. Yeah, that's Hell World.
That's the one that kind of like really like lost me. But I love the first one. The first one was like the strongest. I thought the second wasn't horrible, but the first one was, like you said that perfectly too. You immediately start to distrust the surroundings. You don't know where this is going, what's going to happen next. You can't trust any of the character. Like you said it perfectly. Like you just keep waiting on something to happen. And I revisited all of them it's been a couple years now, and I haven't watched them recently. I actually was going to try to watch all of them before I watched the new one, but that didn't happen. That was being overzealous. But I do think that the first one is another one that you just like, it's an experience. Once you see it once, like it's really difficult to put it out of your head.
Oh yeah, and this one is one that I love. Also, we have to talk about Ashley Lawrence as Kirsty
Yeah.
Cotton.
Yeah.
She's, I think, one of the most underrated Final Girls, and she's actually a great actress. Like when you watch her in this first film, some Final Girls, you see them in the first films, they're very green, they're very young, and I
Kind of
think she
bubbly.
knocked it out of the park. She really did, and like, and it's kind of cool too because they don't introduce her until about 20 minutes into the film. It's kind of
Right.
like, you know, you get a good chunk of the movie without her. You experience Julia first and her memories of Frank, and you even see Frank messing with the box first. So you get all these things first, and then they bring in the character that you're like, oh, I see some hope. I see a little bit of light. And then she has to use the Cenobites to, you know what I mean, get her father back and get Frank back to them. So I love that element of making her a much smarter type Final Girl because she has to compete on an intellectual level with the Cenobites, which is unlike a lot of other Final Girls that we see in typical horror movies.
Yeah, a lot of them are lucky. It's more about oh, I hid in the right place, or I ran to the right area, or you know, someone else got there just in the nick of time. And I think the smart Final Girls are something that I think we are finally starting to see a little bit more of in a modern sense. Like one of my favorites is Erin from Your Next. She is like up there on my Final Girl crushes. I absolutely love her. Her character was just phenomenal. But I think, to your point, I think this character is definitely like an introduction into what was to come later, because a lot of them were a lot of Final Girls were either, you know, they're either overly sexualized, or they're very, they're put down a lot, or there's like, they always have to overcome all these extra things, or they're just lucky. This is not like they're super smart, or they just have all these instincts that they're just lucky. And it is really nice to watch this and then see it be something kind of outside the box like that. So I totally agree. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I love how, like I said, when she's able to finally get back to the house and like all the stuff starts going down and it's like chaos and like the special effects, that's when the special effects really hit and you're like, oh damn, like this stuff is crazy. Like, and they go for it. And that's what I love too, is Clive Barker filmed it in such a kind of dark, kind of gritty, grimy way. It's just like you kind of want to take a shower after you watch it because you're like, oh man, like some of this stuff is like, you're like, yeah, some of it's just out there. Even that monster, that weird monster that tries to take the box from her, that you kind of don't even get an explanation to where what he is. He's got like that weird baby face and little arms, and he's like, I was like, oh my god.
I know. I think I feel like I have said something similar in regards to Hellraiser, about there is something that lingers on you after you watch it, and you're kind of like, oh, I need to like get that off. Like it's weird too, because to me, you know, there's a lot of horror movies that have, you know, gore, body horror, that do things like that. But this has such an interesting mix of the gore and the like effects and stuff. But it all just has like a really big story driven purpose. And that to me made it way more effective than just gore for the sake of gore. Like it has a purpose. Everything that is done for a reason. And I think that it's really hard to ignore that as a viewer, because it immediately affects your emotions as you're watching it, which is super impressive.
Yeah, and I think that's just a real good testament to Clive Barker's writing.
Yes.
He's so fabulous. And like his novels, if people out there haven't read his novels, like go out and read his novels. He's so good at crafting and descripting stuff and really building a world and an atmosphere. And you can tell. And even like, because he did the Candyman short story. So when you watch Candyman and Hellraiser, you can feel those kind of themes like going on. And it's just a writer who really cares about what he does. And it's really nice to see that.
Yeah, it's definitely a true art form, because sometimes so I haven't read anything by him, I know, but I haven't. Like I I have The Hellbound Heart. I have a copy of it, but I haven't had it for very long and haven't had time to read it. But I intend to remedy that. I plan on reading stuff, but I just haven't yet. But I will say what I've heard from people who have read, who like plenty of people who read his stuff before it was ever, like people who knew what Hellraiser was before it was Hellraiser. Like the things that I keep normally hearing is that it translates so well from the book to a story, because a lot of times, especially if it's not handled with care, you lose a lot of good stuff when you adapt something to film. And that's always a worry of like people who love books, who love video games, who love comics. How are the people over this project going to put this good stuff that we get from these other experiences and turn it into a film experience that is at least similar to or the same as what we experienced with this other media? And what I hear all the time is that this is one that just translated really, really well. But yeah, that's what I've always heard, is that it translates really well from book to film.
Oh yeah, it's very good in terms of the book. When I read it, it's one of those books that just right on par with the movie. Like sometimes I enjoy it a little bit more, but it's right on par with the movie for me, in my opinion.
Yeah, because you said so. Because you did film first, and then you were like, "Oh, I need to check this out." And do you feel like, I mean, yeah, I guess you feel like it did it justice, right? So, which do you think is better?
If I was to, I really do love the film because of you get to see the visuals.
Sure.
But then again, the book really gets you to dive into the heads of the characters more. And the fact that Clive Barker is so descriptive, it really helps put you there. So for me, I would probably actually pick the book over the movie. Okay. If I was to say which one I enjoy more, I would say the book over the movie, but the movie does do the book a very good justice.
That's good. Yeah, because it's not always easy that's one of the things that I feel like would get lost in translation, is those thoughts that you no longer have access to, because you have to be able to convey those things in other ways for the viewers to get the full picture, especially if you're going out to an audience, which is always going to be the case, because there's always going to be people who see the movies that haven't read the books. And like to be able to make sure that these new viewers, these people who have known nothing about this world, are able to put all of that together and get like the whole picture. So that's important. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So definitely. Your last one is one I also just watched for the first time. So your fifth one is Possessor.
Yeah, and this is our most recent one. So this is like our most modern film that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
This is by Brendan Cronenberg. So if people don't know that, he's the son of David Cronenberg. So you know what you're going to kind of get when you get to these films.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So that's what I love about Possessor, is it's body horror to its truest form, with a very unique, interesting story that we have kind of seen done before, but it's a very new element. Yeah. Very new element.
Yeah.
Because we've seen films where they have, hitmen going out to kill people or stuff like that, but we've never really seen one where they have an organization that puts somebody else in someone else's body, in the mind, and you are able to control them to do the deed. So that to me was a very interesting concept. And I love how Brendan really evolved it throughout the film, and you get to experience it really actually as a visual, and like through the sound, everything. You really get to experience what it would be like as somebody else, kind of.
Yeah. I watched this for the first time like a month or so ago. I think that sounds right. And I went in completely blind. The only thing I knew, which I'm learning is actually probably the best way to watch most horror movies. Some of them I can't help it, like Scream, I'm impatient. So I've watched everything they put out. But like with this, because, it was on your list and you had posted about it, or I feel like there was another interaction we had about the film before I watched it. And I finally was like, you know what, I'm going to watch it. And I watched it. And going into it blind was fun because I had no idea what I was watching.
Yeah.
I had no idea what the film was about. I knew literally nothing about it. And I think that because of the way this film progresses, that was the smartest thing I could have done. Because I think if I had read anything or watched a trailer, I would have already had these like notions in my head versus going in completely blank. And it was wild. Like, it was such a wild movie. And it reminded me of, and I may have told you this when we were talking about it before, but it reminds me a lot of the Jennifer Lopez movie, The Cell.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I remember you
completely
telling me that.
different, but it's very similar. And the atmosphere and the visuals, I mean, they're absolutely nothing alike. But the concept of going into this, I mean, it's, you know, just some of those elements were really similar to me. But this one was wild, and definitely up there on the body horror and the gore stuff, which of course I loved. I thought that was awesome. So yeah, this one was crazy.
Oh yeah, Brendan, I think it was cool too that he stayed true to the practical effects. Even a fun one I wanted to talk about was, you know, the guy when she's finally in the new man's body and she's controlling him and stuff,
Yeah.
and he grabs like those little white dots like out of the air. That's actually a real effect that they did where they froze water using sound. They built this device for this movie that has mini speakers and woofers, and they literally froze a drop of water in midair. And that's so when he's going to pluck it out of the air, it's real. It's really there. Everything in this film is actually something you can touch.
I didn't know that. I mean, I knew I think in a lot of ways you could tell a lot of that a majority of it was practical, but I didn't know it was that level though. That's crazy.
I know, yeah. Brendan, I think his team, he likes creating films that pushes the limits of what you can do. He's like, all right, what can we do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What can we do that's new in terms of special effects? You know what I mean? What can we bring to the table? And I think that's a good way to challenge your creative team around you. You know what I mean? Because if you do the same stuff over and over, it just becomes easy. It becomes cookie cutter. You don't want to, you know, there's no learning in it. And when you try to do something new, something difficult, and stretch your imagination, you know, that's a really good thing for your creative team.
Yeah, and I think then being also able to see the fruits of that labor is like a whole nother, because I feel like in general, you know, we can be proud of every project that we do, but when it is something unique that we've had to put more thought into, or we had to really think outside the box or elevate what we were creating, when you go back and you see it, you have a different level of pride for it because of all of the extra stuff that went into it. What else has he done?
He did Antiviral, and then the newest movie he just did was Infinity Pool with Mia Goth and Alexander Skarsgård.
Okay.
So those are his 3 feature films.
I gotcha. Okay. I have not seen the other 2.
I've seen them all. Yeah, I've seen them all. I love him. He's probably in my top 5 new favorite directors in the game. You know what I mean? Someone that I'm very excited for body horror to see what they do next.
Yeah, because this came out, Possessor is 2019? No.
Yeah.
Is that right? 2019? Okay.
I think it's 2019, yeah. And then he takes a lot of gaps too, because I think Antiviral was 2013.
Oh, wow.
And then 2019 was Possessor. And then not as big of a gap, but now 23, and we got Infinity Pool.
Still a decent gap, though.
Yeah, so you can tell he takes his time. He's one of those directors that loves to take his time.
Yeah, and I mean, and if the other 2 are anywhere near as good as this one, then it's obvious. It's obviously got a lot that goes into it to make it so. Because this one was crazy, and I think like one of the things that I really liked about it was I didn't expect, given the premise and what was going on, I wasn't expecting any type of like emotional response as far as like the family stuff. So like when we get those clips, and I'll spare some of it for spoiler purposes in case people are watching that haven't seen this, because it is a little bit newer than some of the other films we talked about. But with this, like there's moments, especially pertaining to her child, that I wasn't expecting to feel the things that I felt because of the type of movie it is. But I think that that's a testament to the writing and the acting, because you do, like, I got pulled in, I was invested, I cared. You know, and it's sometimes like, you know, like I was saying before, like sometimes there's gore or there's body horror just for the sake of having it. But then there are these films like Possessor that come along and they pull you into the story, and it becomes a much broader experience, which I think this was executed like perfectly. Like I loved this. I thought it was really good.
Oh yeah. I think all the performances, keeping it a very small cast, and you kind of really just get everybody's vibe, and they all do such a good job because we have Andrea Riseborough for kind of the first part of the movie, and
Yeah.
then when she transitions into the boy's body, then it's like it becomes a whole different film.
Yes,
So you
agreed.
kind of have two lead actors in this film, and they carry the film very well. And it's two kind of different tones as well when you're watching the film. It kind of, like you said, it evolves as you're going through the movie.
Yeah, and the journey of everything that happens when things start getting really kind of out there is like you all like you do. I felt like I was literally going through it as well. Like there was a sense of urgency, a sense of panic, a sense of dread, all of those things as all of these other things start happening. Like once you get into like the final act, especially like when it just really hits the fan and it goes really bizarre, like I just thought like this was one that I felt like really towed the line between keeping you feeling about like how real this was compared to how like bizarre it actually was, because it does get weird. The movie gets very weird, and there's a couple of moments where I was like, what? And I had to like really focus for a minute so that I could understand what I was seeing. But I think that again, that's just a testament to how well it's done, because any horror movie I walk away from that I have to think about afterwards, that I think about days after I watched it, that I can have conversations about and still learn something new about it, is shows you how well it's made. And I think that's definitely the case with Possessor.
Oh yeah, this is definitely a very strong film, and like I urge anybody out there to check this out. That's very a fan. If you're a fan of body horror, because there's a lot of trigger warning type stuff in here. I know that for sure. Like this
Agreed,
isn't
yeah.
a film
Yeah.
for everybody, but
No.
if you're a horror fan and you really
Mhm.
like interesting, unique stories, this
Yes.
is definitely the film for you for sure. And like you said, strong performances, great special effects, and it's a journey that even if you just take it once, you're gonna remember it. That's what's fantastic about it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Although I will say that even though I'm sure there are definitely people who this would be a one and done kind of thing, I would also say that this does have rewatch value, because you're going
Yeah.
to watch it a second, third, maybe fourth time and still be seeing things, picking up on things that you didn't the first, because there's a lot going on even from the very beginning. And so these things start to make more sense as you're watching it the first time, but then you really get a bigger picture, I think, on multiple watches. I've only seen it once, but it's definitely one that I would revisit, because I know that I could go into it a second time and still come out with a different feeling of experience, because of just all of the stuff that's involved in the story.
Oh yeah, that's what's cool too. Is like you said, my favorite thing about my second and third watch with the film was
Hmm.
probably that I really got to enjoy the music and the cinematography more. You really
Yeah, I
get
can
to
see that.
understand like that intro shot. There's an intro shot with the buildings, and you're kind of just the camera's floating, and then it turns slowly, and then you're in the elevator with the character, and it's like you're like you just floated in there. It's like you're like, huh? Like, but now I'm here and you're experiencing it, and I love that too. So yeah, when you watch it a
Yeah.
second and third time, you're really gonna pick up on like little nuanced things that are in the film.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think you miss that stuff the first watch because you're so busy trying to understand what's going on. You're trying to get
Yeah.
kind of a lay of the land, the way the film is going to flow, what the characters are doing. And I think that's definitely true. I think it has at least a several watch. Like, I think you could watch this several times before you really get like a whole picture in your head about what's going on. But yeah, this one was really good. I liked it. I don't think I did anything with it as far as like review or anything, but I actually was not, I wouldn't say I was surprised that I liked it. We are not that different in our taste. I mean, we are and we aren't, I guess. But I think like, cause I know like you're more open-minded about like comedy horror, and I'm not so much, but I think at the core of some of these other things, we have similar taste in things. So when you spoke so highly of it, it was on this list. I was pretty confident I would walk away really liking it. And I did. It was streaming. I don't know if it still is. It probably is. I don't think I rented it. I
I
think it's
believe it's on Hulu. Yeah, right now I think it's streaming
streaming.
on Hulu, and they have the unrated version on there. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that's the only one I've seen. Then is the one I think that's on Hulu. So whatever the unrated is, yeah. So if you're watching this, you've not seen Possessor. I do recommend it. It's like psychological body horror, like espionage kind of stuff. It's got some interesting, like some themes. Like it's got a lot of themes.
Oh yeah, and it all works so well. It's great.
It does. It marries together very well. Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, that's your list. Your 5 influential horror.
Yeah.
I don't think any. I'm trying to remember. I've done so many of these. Okay, so Friday the 13th, Nightmare 2, Sleepaway, and Possessor have not been on the channel. I can't remember if Hellraiser has been or not. I don't remember.
I don't remember. I've watched a few of the episodes, and I don't think so. I don't think so. I remember Hereditary being on there. Some Stephen King.
Yeah, there was
Exorcist has been on here.
Yep. There's been a bunch of the older ones. I mean, obviously, like most horror fans have some of these under their belt anyway, as far as movies they've seen and really liked. But I do think you have, like, I don't think any of your list has been on the channel before. So
that's fun. It's cool because that's all first time talks, and everybody, they should enjoy it. Because like I said, it's, if you're a huge slasher fan, like that's my realm, that's my heart and my home. But then a close second is body horror, and that's why I really wanted to talk about these 5, because they're the ones that speak to me the most in terms of, like I said, they in memory, like they just stick with you, and even like I'll always remember it. And I love showing these films to people too, so that's fun always.
Yeah, and it's so crazy that 2 of your 5 were relatively recent watches for me.
That's fun.
Like Sleepaway Camp was one that I'd kind of gone under my radar for a long time. Like I knew it existed, but I'm not a super massive like 80s horror fan, but I have ones that I like, and I'm open to watching them. So I was just kind of like, oh, maybe one day. And then I watched it and I loved it. And then Possessor was the other one. So it's just funny because like only a few lists have had movies that I've never seen. And it's funny that yours had 2 that I literally like just saw. Like, not long after probably we connected on like socials and stuff probably. But yeah, well, this was fun. Thank you for coming on and talking your influential horror.
Thank you so much. It was a blast. It really was. Anytime.
Yeah. I'm going to put all of Norin's stuff in the description for this episode. His YouTube channel. I'll put his letterbox because he's much better at making lists than I am, and Twitter as well. And so make sure you're following and subscribing to his stuff. And yeah, hope you guys have a good rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend coming up, and I will see you in the next one.
Bye.